Good evening, YouTube. Dutyron back in again with another video. And tonight I have a special guest, Dr. Darrin Porcher. But before I get to him, I want to set up what tonight's video is about. Tonight we're going to talk about Jacob Blake. That's the 29-year-old black man who was shot by police in Wisconsin on Sunday. We received so many hits on the website, questions. Dutyron, are you going to cover this? Dutyron, are you going to talk about it? Dutyron, what do you think about this? And I decided to do a video with my great friend, my good friend, my lifelong buddy, my law enforcement confidant and partner, Darrin Porcher. Dr. Darrin Porcher is a 20-year vet, just like myself, and he is a criminal justice expert, and he's also a law enforcement correspondent for many major news networks. But before we get into it, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, so you will get all things Dutyron when I go live or when I do a premiere upload, just as I'm doing here today. Again, subscribe to my channel, follow me on all social media, one word, Dutyron, D-U-T-Y-R-O-N, that's Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Again, we're going to get right into it now. I'm going to show you a quick clip from Kenosha, Wisconsin. This is a local affiliate. The clip I'm going to show you is from Chicago, but they're kind of local to Wisconsin, and they got some pretty decent coverage of what's going on right now. Again, I use a lot of caution before I point fingers or draw conclusions. In these type of sensitive situations, we all know that there's always the police side of the story, there's the perpetrator side of the story, and then there's something right in between there. We have no body cam footage from Kenosha police. They do not have the body cam footage instituted until 2022, I believe. So until 2022, they weren't funded for it. So there's no body cam footage, but we will wait and out of abundance of precaution before we point any fingers. But I can tell you this, as someone who's been in the business and been in the field a long time, most of our police professionals, men and women out there, are not going to that level of force for no good reason. But let's get right to it. Thank you to my Patreon, my channel members, and all the people who subscribe. And we're going to watch a quick clip, and then we'll be right back at it.
Authorities here say that there were 37 different fires that Kenosha and other neighboring fire departments had to respond to last night. Some of them destroyed city vehicles, others destroyed buildings like the one you see behind me. That is the view all over town, as you can imagine. City officials say there's extensive damage in several areas of town, and it will take some time to try to figure out exactly what all of this will cost. With help from volunteers and his family, Abel Alejo is cleaning out what is left of his taco shop and convenience store. Like most every other building on the block, it was destroyed by fire and looting. But even after it's cleaned up, he says this has put him out of business.
I know what happened here in Kenosha with the police shooting, but I think there are better ways to deal with those issues than destroying the neighborhoods.
David Raymer is loading up what he can into his van and heading out. He says he and other residents stood outside their apartment building last night to protect it from the crowds who were destroying other buildings, but he won't.
Just to set this up, what I'm showing here is the aftermath of innocent business owners whose buildings and businesses were looted, burned down through rioters and people who were burning even some black-owned businesses. I saw one car dealership with the Black Lives Matter sign burned down basically to the ground.
Be here to do it again tonight.
Really,
they have told all of us to get out if we can and only take what's necessary.
All around Kenosha, people are cleaning up from last night's destruction, and there are plenty of volunteers offering to help.
I understand why it's happening. I understand how angry people are. I'm sad that this is what it's come to.
They're also preparing to protect themselves if there is more violence tonight. Lumber to cover up windows is in short supply.
We're cleaning up, but now we need boards, and there aren't any. All the lumber stores here are empty. Kenosha, Racine, Illinois, there's none.
For many longtime Kenosha residents, the damage to their town is heartbreaking. Even as many say they understand the anger and frustration many feel over the police shooting of Jacob Blake that prompted the violence. The Kingdom Word Ministry Church is the only building on the block without serious damage.
We're looking at it as a miracle. The only thing standing is a church, hopefully a symbol that, you know what, maybe this world can bring some peace.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A church left, the only thing standing in the wake of Jacob Blake. And again, I have to say this with extreme conviction. You know, these are situations that are fueled by our local politicians, the governor, the local mayor. It's just a terrible situation. But I'm going to bring on our special guest. Everybody knows Dr. Darrin Porcher. He is a criminal justice expert, a great longtime friend of mine, and also a law enforcement correspondent for major news networks here in New York and really throughout the United States. So welcome in, Dr. Darrin Porcher. Thanks for taking out your time. I know you're very busy. I greatly appreciate you coming on in here.
Ron, thanks again. As always, it's a pleasure to sit down. We're like two old friends when we talk about this stuff. So this is never work. This is more enjoyment or a pleasure, so to speak.
Exactly. And the feelings obviously are mutual. I can't wait for us to be able to get down and get out there and break some bread and sit down over a nice meal and talk about some of this stuff. But we have many of my followers or subscribers who are really they really are waiting to hear what we have to say about this. And I've already off the side, off of videos, spoke one-on-one with several of my really loyal subscribers and supporters, and they know how I feel about this. And I'm almost certain that you, Darrin, have the similar sentiment. We have, you know, our local officials on the state and local levels just jumping the gun, going straight to, you know, the highest, degree of drawing conclusions without seeing all the evidence. And I'd like to hear, and I know that everybody that's watching and listening wants to definitely hear your take on this. And what do you feel about this, Darrin?
Well, it's multi-layered. When I look at this initially, the first thing is when you look at the individual that's trying to get into his car and he's shot by the officers, the first thing you say to yourself is, wow, you know, this is kind of crazy. One of the first things that I can tell you from being a prior lieutenant in the Internal Affairs Bureau, I investigated a lot of these police shootings, and the use of force is always ugly, no matter how you dice and slice it. And so when we look at this, it's no different. One of the things that I do know that occurred is the videographer or the person that shot the video on this basically stated that the officers told the gentleman on several occasions, drop the knife, drop the knife. I'm not specific as to what time frame this took place, right, because the audio is inconsistent. So that being said, I don't know if the gentleman was in a process of going into his car, and while he was getting into his car, that's when he brandished the knife. The officer that was right next to this individual had a different vantage point than you, I, or anyone else had. So he can give a greater testament as to what in fact occurred. We do know that this gentleman was tasered prior to being shot. Right, and it was ineffective. The taser had no impact on him. So one of the things we refer to is something we call the Force Continuum. That's basically the progression of the use of force. Non-lethal force was employed at first, and it was subsequently ineffective, which led to him being shot. It's very questionable at this stage as to was the level of force justified or was it not justified, because they're in the process of engaging or embarking upon an official investigation. I can understand the department not introducing snippets as to, okay, well, there was a weapon just to shut people up. Right. Because when you're conducting an investigation, it's of optimum importance that you have a great level of confidentiality when you're gathering the facts. And then when you have that information, that's when you disseminate it accordingly. This just happened. It's going to take time. Mm-hmm. But what's just so unfortunate is I live in New York City, and Mayor Bill de Blasio was making comments to this. He tweeted. And he's stating, right. He tweeted that another black person shot, another unarmed black person shot by police. Right. And what that does is it basically fuels the rhetoric or throws gasoline on the flame, so to speak. We just had a protest here with hundreds of people that were marching down the street in protest of what happened in Wisconsin.
Right.
Now is the time we need to sow the seeds of diplomacy as opposed to escalating a situation that has a propensity to become inflammatory.
Right.
We see, as you showed in your video, we see a church being burned. We see a multitude of different businesses. I don't know if they're black owned. I don't know if they're white owned.
Yeah,
these businesses are being torched.
The only business that wasn't torched was the church. The only
okay,
house,
and then my apologies.
Okay. I know because you didn't get to see it. You didn't see the actual video I was playing. But every business on the street, other than the church, was the only one that wasn't untouched. So you have a situation where you have local people in that Wisconsin neighborhood who are outraged and rightfully so. When I looked at the video first, I just was like, I gasped. I looked at it. But as a police professional, as a law enforcement professional, I know that there was more to that story than what met the eye. In other words, we know, as people who have been in this position many different times, that we don't know what was said to that officer by Mr. Blake. We don't know if he said to him, "I'm not going to jail. You're gonna have to kill me." I've heard, I don't know how many times you've heard that, but I guarantee you heard it probably just as many times as I have. Listen, I'm not going back. Now, this is a guy who I only looked into him, Darrin, very little. I looked into his last arrest, and it was 2015, and it was for brandishing a firearm in a bar, in like a local pub. And then he resisted arrest, and the police called in the canine unit, and he was apprehended and taken down by a canine unit. You would think that common sense would prevail with somebody like this, like, hey, I've gone through this once before with the police. It doesn't really work. But that's not always the mentality of someone who is not living their life the right way, so to speak. And that's probably the best way I could put it. I feel that, a lot of people are watching our politicians and are looking for guidance from them. And when you have the governor of Wisconsin saying yet another unarmed black man killed by the hands of a white police officer, that is inflammatory. It's irresponsible, and this is all my opinion. My audience here doesn't have to agree with what I'm saying, but for me, that's what helps fuel the fire on a very, very tumultuous situation that is already in the wake of George Floyd, spiraling out of control. You have riots going on in Portland, over in Chicago. You have Atlanta. You got New York City nightly. So, Darrin, my takeaway from this is irresponsible politics fueling a very bad situation that is looking wise. For face value, when we see that video, we all as Americans and as good citizens say, "Oh my goodness, that's horrible." Well, he got shot 7 times, but we don't know the full story. The book is not open. We're looking at one page, and I don't know if you agree with me on that or how you feel about that.
Well, the optics of a police shooting are always troubling, and it's multifaceted in connection with how you perceive the incident in comparison to someone else. We have a classic statement: a picture is worth 100 or 1,000 words, so to speak. Mm-hmm. We all have a different imagery that we assess when we look at something. So it just a police shooting is no difference. I mean, I've spent upwards of over 100+ hours investigating an incident that went no longer than 15 seconds. And that is the progression of how these investigations are conducted. What precipitated the particular incident? I've heard that there was a domestic incident. I've also heard that he was a person that was acting as a peacemaker. But at the same token, it just didn't make sense to me if this was the individual that was possibly breaking up a fight, why the police would look to take him into custody and follow him away from the particular encounter. Right. We have a lot of unanswered questions. So for the most part, we're speaking from a place of conjecture. We don't really know. Right. And the semblance of the fact pattern will eventually be rolled out. But the key component to this is the officer's vantage point. when this individual opened up the car door and the officer decided to engage his firearm, shooting this individual possibly eight times.
7 or 8 times.
That is really going to be the key vantage point in how the officer can articulate what he saw that caused him to use deadly physical force.
Right.
And the individual didn't die, but the use of a firearm constitutes deadly physical force.
Right. And Darrin, the key word there was articulate. We don't have the advantage of police worn body cam here. So it's going to be just like an investigation back from the 90s and early 2000s in the NYPD, where you have the officer statements, you have the witnesses on the scene, and then you're going to have physical evidence, right? So if they come back and, just for argument's sake, there is a gun inside that car recovered, then you have your progression of force. They utilized less than deadly. They used the non-lethal taser, didn't work. I don't know if they had batons available to them or mace or anything other on the tool belts there. It's a small police department over there in Wisconsin. So I'm not quite sure what type of equipment they have on their tool belt, but I know when you and I went through the police academy in 1991, it was that progression of force, which was, the mace, your nightstick, first verbal commands, mace, nightstick, and then deadly physical force, right? We don't know if they grappled with this guy, because from what I saw in that video looked like a small scuffle at the back of the vehicle on the passenger side, and then it went around. But listen, that's neither here nor there. What you said is 100% on the money. I also feel that, listen, nobody here likes to see a human being either get severely injured or, God forbid, lose a life. There's talk that this guy's father said that he potentially could be paralyzed from the waist down. We need to, I think, and I talk about this a lot on my videos, we need to also concentrate, and this is an area that everybody leaves out, is educating the public on compliance with police. It's not about resistance. It's about complying, having your day in court, and then being able to speak about it afterwards, because we can always have that due process. These officers are going to be afforded it. Everybody in America is afforded due process under the law, right? So if this gentleman here, didn't resist arrest, and here's another question I got that came in like 15, 20 different messages earlier today is, why did the police shoot him if they knew that the kids were in the car? Well, there's a possibility that the police didn't know the kids were in the car. Maybe the windows were tinted in the back. And my question is if he knew the kids were in the car and he saw police drawing weapons on him, making commands, he got tased, or potential misfire on a taser. I don't know if it penetrated or if it missed him or whatever. He knew that the police he wasn't free to leave. Why go into a car if some two officers are pointing their weapons at you? It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, a lot of the women were saying to me, well, Dutyron, why did the police shoot with kids in the car? We can't Monday morning quarterback this thing because we weren't there. But, at the end of the day, compliance is key here. And I say this to any person that's listening, anybody watching the replay. If a police officer tells you to put your hands on the steering wheel or stop what you're doing, don't give him resistance. Ask them, why, what's going on, but listen to the commands. Put your hands up in the air, let them handcuff you, or whatever has to be done. You'll be able to get a lawyer, you'll be able to go through the system, or you might even just get a ticket and be on your way, or might not even get anything, But this guy did have a felony, I think sex crime, some type of felony warrant. So maybe they ran his name. Who knows? I don't know, Darrin, did you hear anything about that?
Well, I did hear that he had a criminal history, but I don't think that the criminal history should really have a. I don't think that should justify the use of deadly physical force.
But if they wanted to detain him because of the warrant, if they ran his name, that's another story. Right?
Well, I mean, if you want to detain someone, I mean, that's one thing. But even in the midst of detaining a person, the use of deadly physical force should only be committed to if you're in a situation where you're experiencing that deadly physical force can be used against yourself or third party.
Right.
And that's really what's going to have to be introduced by the officer in connection with his judgment call in firing at that particular time.
Gotcha.
When one thing you'll notice is the officer is holding the individual by his shirt. And so that can, that substantiates the level of immediacy based on the close proximity between the officer and the individual. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, if the person was in possession of a knife, he can turn in a fraction of a second. He can subsequently cause a serious physical injury or a death to the officer if he, in fact, was in possession of an edged weapon, being a knife, or worst case scenario, that being a firearm. And we just have a lot of unanswered questions. But going back to what his prior criminal history is, I don't really think that plays into the narrative as significant in connection with the use of deadly physical force.
I agree. Other people, the only reason I mentioned it is I saw people speaking about it in the various groups out on social media. And, it's important for us to understand that there is that legal progression of force that the police have to follow. It doesn't just, sometimes it goes from, less than lethal to immediate deadly physical force, all based on the circumstances that are put forth in front of the police officers. But here in this situation, we don't have the full picture yet. So it's really inflammatory for people to start talking about, well, these cops, they should go to jail, this, that, and the other. We need to have a cooler heads and let the information come out. Now, I hope that Wisconsin, maybe steps it up. And I don't know if there's that 30-day rule where, they have to wait a period of time, or if there's some kind of contractual union rule of, questioning. Like, remember, we had that with NYPD. It's recently been changed, where you had X amount of time before you have to speak about a certain situation. I don't think that that's in existence there, but we soon shall see. And I'm hoping that sooner than later, the facts come out. But always great to have you on, Darrin. Everybody enjoys you tremendously. And I hope to one day when, maybe I have a lot of bucks where I can nail you down as a contract, maybe once, have you commit to once a week, like on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, like today. It's the Dutyron and Dr. Darrin show every Tuesday, 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. I'm saving up for that. I know I got to have a lot of money in the bank. I'm fit for the challenge,
You're funny. I'm fit for the challenge, and
how many
think that we can have.
Listen, I put this plea out in the chat, in the comment section. Type in a number 1 in the comment section down below if you want to see Dutyron and Dr. Darrin once a week. We'll try to work it out. But seriously, thank you so much. If everybody wants to subscribe or follow Dr. Darrin Porcher on all of his social media, he's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I'll link all of his stuff down below in the description. Any closing statements or anything, Darrin? You got the floor.
No, I think that one of the things that we need to understand or identify is resisting arrest is never a good thing, no matter how innocent you feel or you perceive you may be. In many of these cases, I see resisting arrest as the foundation that gets to the next point. I'm not saying because you resist arrest, you have a right to kill someone, but I think that we can reduce the violence in a lot of or de-escalate in many of these cases if you don't resist, if you don't resist arrest. If you don't resist arrest, just go forth with the agenda that the officer is introducing and fight it in court. Fight it in an arena where you're on an even playing field. But the place to fight an officer is not in the street. Right.
Very well said. And I think most people with common sense will concur and agree wholeheartedly with that statement. I have many, many friends who were, from high school that really chose the wrong path. And a lot of them aren't here today to talk about it due to the fact of drug use or, incarceration and repeat offense. Some of them are still in jail. So it's really not a great way to go. And I think education, I think some of our politicians need to at least glance over this part of educating our youth and our adults out in public to, not resist arrest. It's really not a great way to go because it does have it has a tendency to escalate a less than you know, a situation that can be a lot less than what it turns out to be. So I greatly appreciate your message here tonight. Guys, again, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell, follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all one word, Dutyron. Darrin, thank you so much for being in here. I really, really, like I said, your words really mean a lot, and everybody go and watch all of Darrin's work that he does on all the major networks. He's also on Court TV, right? Court TV, and
I do Court TV also.
Court TV, HLN, right?
HLN, Court TV, Fox News.
There you go.
The local media here, CBS,
CNN
NBC.
once in a while. We don't like to see him over there, but he goes over there because he's fair and impartial. That's what I like about Darrin. So great. You know, it's always great to see you no matter what network you're on, Darrin. I try to get to each and every one of them, and I appreciate all the positive comments. Again, good night, everybody, and I'll talk to you guys on the next live. Thank you for joining. God bless the United States of America. Peace, guys.